I will be talking about the Firefox DevTools Debugger project, which is built using React and Redux. So it's amazing, right? We write applications using React, and now we can use another application to debug this application, which is also written using React. So a quick question. How many of you here are using only console.log to JavaScript to debug your JavaScript code, including me? It's okay to admit using console.log is it's easy, it's convenient, and most important, the job gets done. But it is hard in looking at things or catching things as they happen, or getting deep down in the code to see where exactly it's broken. The modern-day browser dev tools come with comprehensive tools to help you debug and evaluate your JavaScript code. And once you learn the basics of using a debugger, you will realize that using a debugger is not only fast and easy, but it can save you from hours of frustration. So once again, hi, hello, good morning. My name is Princia, and I'm a lead engineer at Smart Helios, a health tech company based out of Berlin. I contribute to open source, advocate for diversity and inclusion, and also privacy and security. I am a Mozilla Tech speaker. Thank you, Anjana, for the shout out earlier. And I am also an Outreachy alumna, and I have been a Prototype Fund Fellow, which is open source grant from the German government to work on open source. Speaking about today's project, I am a community maintainer for the Firefox DevTools Debugger project. In the early 2017, I landed my first pull request to the debugger project. And back then, it had made me really happy because this was my first pull request into open source. Thank you. The first pull request included flexing these things, what you see here on the top. I added CSS to convert this into Flexbox, and I was so happy. And standing here today in front of you all to present and talk about this debugger, I'm so honored. So thank you, React Rally, for having me here, and thank you for the debugger team for believing in me. Thank you. So, who do you think coined the term debugging? Right. So it was Grace Hopper. But do you know why and how? There was a bug, because back then, when she was working at Harvard, and you can imagine the size of the computers occupying at least half the size of the room, it was sometimes evident that these tiny little intruders got into the inner workings of the system. And one fine day, Grace Hopper's associates noticed that there was really a bug in there. And in her notes, Grace Hopper made a comment saying, "First real case of a bug being found in computer systems." And the term debug obviously refers to removing the bug from out of the computer system. Before we really look into how the debugger is built using React and Redux, let's look at how the debugger has evolved over time. Venkman. Mozilla's first JavaScript debugger was called Venkman. It is just yesterday I saw this tweet, and so are you aware of Venkman here? Or at least the reference to Venkman? So the reference to Venkman goes back to a character played by Bill Murray in in the movies Ghostbuster and Ghostbuster 2. And in 2000, this is how the first debugger looked like. Then came Firebug, and the story of Firefox and Firebug are synonymous with the rise of the web. This was in 2006 when Firebug came out, and it started with a single tab console with Ajax logging. And in 2016, Firebug was unified with what you see now, the modern DevTools debugger project, and the debugger was rewritten from scratch using React and Redux. So from 2000 to 2016, this is how the debugger has evolved over time. The debugger anatomy. You have a tab where you can see all the list of sources, source files, the main tab where you can read the source code itself of the program that you're debugging, and a tool tab. On the tool tab, there are a bunch of things on the top where you can pause debugging, where you can step over, where you can step in a function to know more about it, or if you just know what the value is, you can just step out from the function. You can also add watch expressions. So if you want to watch the value of a particular variable over time, how it's debugging, what kind of value it has, then watch expressions can be available. And all the available breakpoints themselves are available in this panel. And notice the little logo sitting next to this file. So the debugger is also able to identify what kind of files this is. One common thing usually when you talk about debugger is breakpoints. So who invented breakpoints?
Grace Hopper.
No, I'm sorry. So it was Elizabeth Holberton, one of the 6 original programmers of the first general-purpose electronic digital computer called ENIAC. Now, the other question is, why is it called breakpoint? OK, so back then, Elizabeth and team, when they were debugging on ENIAC, so they were working on this second-order linear ordinary differential equation. Wow, that was a tongue twister for me. So they were debugging this Heon's equation, which was not entered correctly into the accumulator. Now, to stop the program, they had to literally pull off the wire, and which means they actually broke the point, and that's how this, the breakpoints were invented. Yeah, wow, so it's amazing, right? So actually pulling out the wires from computers to debug their programs. Who would have thought? So what is the debugging experience like? Let's say we have an application where we have to input some data, and we input something on the input field, a normal input field, and I click add, and now something breaks. I see some unexpected output. So to all the people who raise their hands, including me, what I would do normally is go back to my code, start typing manually console.logs, because, yeah, let's all admit, it is easy, and it gets the job done. Yeah, I would go on editing console.logs as many places as possible. I do this all the time. But now let's see what the experience itself is when it comes to using breakpoints. So the same application, I've entered a wrong value, open the DevTools, pull up the debugger, look into the source file, look into the exact source file, and the exact place where I added the console log on the editor, I'll try to add a breakpoint on line number 10. And refresh the page, add a breakpoint, try to add a breakpoint, and it pauses because there is a breakpoint being added. And yeah, because of this paused execution, now what you can do is the value of title at this point is undefined. So go to the toolbar, step over the function, and now notice the debugging action has moved to line number 11, which means the value of title is now available. And when you hover on it, you can see the values. So instead of console.log, you can actually do all of this without leaving your browser. So in this case, what actually happened is the whole DOM node was being passed. And now I know what has happened, so I can just go and correct the code. And all of this without unnecessary console.logs or your colleague having to remind you, please remove this console.log statement, or some of your lint errors complaining, oh, console.error, and you have to put comments in there, so you can save all the mess. And you can actually pull up a console while you're still on the debugger tab, as you see here, and you can pull out, just type in anything, because when you add a breakpoint and when the value is available, you can also see what the value is. You can also add watch expressions. So if you want to look what this value of the variable is, put in a watch expression and it gives the same value, so that you can understand that variable a bit better or how it changes over time. So what is important, or to make the debugging experience important, what is important is the debugger also needs to understand common tools like Webpack, Babel, TypeScript. When you see a list of source files, the debugger is able to identify Webpack, Babel, TypeScript, and also show their corresponding logos for better experience. And the source map support. So source maps lets you debug your code, not the compiled output. So tools like Webpack, Babel help us developers write clean code but generate more complicated code to debug, like this, which is the minified version of the code of your React code that you would have. Now, the debugging experience makes you feel you are debugging your original code. So it has source maps, so your compiled output is exactly mapped to your source, so you get a feel of debugging like you would in your editor. Worker threads power the modern web, and they need very good debugging support. So workers take off the load from the main UI, and they run in the background. Now, using the new threads panel, you can switch between and independently pause different execution contexts. So this source code, what you see, is the debugger's source code, and debugger has a bunch of worker threads to pretty print the code, or to parse, or for searching things. Now, the next comes log points, and this is my personal favorite feature, and one of the convincing factors for people to switch from traditional console logging to actually use the debugger. What do log points do? So go to line number 23, add a breakpoint, and try to add a log. So when you add a log, you can actually type what you want to see on your console.log. So in this case, I would type in something like title is title, and you don't need any of the console.log statements on your source code, but you can actually put in here. And now when you enter something on the input, and when you add it, because of the log point, that value is actually logged onto the console. So for people who still like using console.log, this is a very good factor to at least try using the debugger, so that you don't have to leave your debugging experience, you don't have to leave the browser, go back to the code, come back and switch. There is also something called condition breakpoints, which let you add conditions so that you get breakpoints only for certain conditions. Now, before log points came in, to the ones who are used to using breakpoints, they have resorted to using condition breakpoints. And what happens here is the same experience. Go and add a condition, and now the condition can be just type in a console.log statement, and the same console.log, title is, title, click, try to input a value on the input bar, and click add. So now what happens is the console is still there. So this is a condition breakpoint. What actually happened now was, because console.log returns undefined, the condition is actually false, the breakpoint does not pause, but because of the console.log statement, the output is logged onto the console. Again, the difference between log points and condition breakpoints using console.log via condition breakpoints is, using condition breakpoints, you have to actually use console.log, because it's console.log which returns undefined, and console.log knows to print output on the console. But using breakpoints, by default, those are console.log statement. You don't have to explicitly give console.log. So please try to use lock points. They can save you so much time by not having to erase code from your editor. All of this being said, the debugging experience for sure is like first class. And I mentioned this debugger is written scratch using React and Redux. So what is the debugger philosophy? When you inspect the running debugger app, you are debugging a web app because the web app is a debugger which is written using React and Redux. Open the browser and open your browser DevTools. You have the debugger. And now if you are actually developing the debugger, then the build of Firefox which you have gives you this nice option, go to Tools, Web Developer, and Browser Toolbox. And now when you click on this, there comes another debugger to debug this previous debugger. Yes. And this is really cool. And this is like the most fulfilling kind of thing as you debug the debugger. So coming back, this is a web app, the debugger, which is written using React and Redux. And now this is the debugger, which was opened using the browser toolbox. Or in other words, this becomes now the debuggy, like your normal web application. And this is your debugger. Are you still with me? It feels like going in and in, but this is the experience. So you're actually debugging the debugger using another debugger, which is the same debugger. Inception. There is no magic here. So if you can build a web app, you can literally hack into this debugger. Now, if the debugger is an app, yes, I kept telling you it's a React app, then how does this app know to debug another app, that too on the browser? For that, Firefox has a server capable of talking to this app via an API called the Remote Debugging Protocol. The debugging protocol allows a debugger to connect to the browser, and this protocol itself operates at the JavaScript level. Going to an application, to-do application, we all love to-dos for the demos. So to-do application, the application is open, pull up the debugger. Now this debugger is the client. And the browser itself is the server. And both this client and the server, they talk to each other via JSON objects. So as I mentioned, the remote debugging protocol itself is written at the JavaScript level and not at the C++ level. OK, having said all of this, now, if you're convinced enough to give this a try, then all the documentation is available at docs.firefoxdev.tools. So once you get the source code and follow the instructions, the first thing you'll have to do is run a build. And when you do this, you will be actually building your version of Firefox. When this is done, it's such a cool feeling to really know that you compiled a local version of Firefox for yourself. And once this is done, now let's look at the debugger. And now I have the source code. You open the debugger. And now let's say we want to change the background of this welcome box message. So I have the source code. Go and locate where the debugger is. So it sits inside the DevTools. And I said it's a client side. And then there is a debugger. And you see the directory structure. It is a React app. I now want to change the background color of the welcome box message. So click on the welcome box CSS. There is this .welcome box. Change the CSS, change the color. I'll put in some color. And I will also add in some fonts, because it has some fonts in there, which need to reflect in this darker shade now. And go to File, Restart Developer, which means you're restarting the Firefox, or just run Mac run. So because all of this is at the JavaScript level, you don't have to recompile it again or rebuild it again. It's just JavaScript, so you just can run it, and boom, it's there. So I just customized a welcome box for my customized debugger. And the fun part comes now. So this is a web app. Now, I open the browser toolbox, and I can inspect and put in any color there. It is a web app. So a regular way of debugging, go and inspect that element, change the color, put it some color. It still works. And open the debugger, and now you have this debugger, which is debugging your customized debugger. So this is debugging the debugger. There is more to come. But first, let's sink in. OK, so previously we looked over the debugger, how the debugger has evolved over time from Wacom to Firebug to the modern DevTools debugger, which is written using React and Redux. We also saw the debugger features, and I hope by now I have convinced you to at least try debugger and leave the comfort zone of using console.log. Just try log points. It works. Now, what I'm going to talk next is something really cool. History will be kind to me, for I intend to debug it. Presenting the time travel debugging. The only reason for time is so that everything does not happen at once. Albert Einstein once quoted, and who better than us developers know this fact of someone saying, OK, it works on my machine, but it does not work on your machine, not my problem. But there comes Web Replay to your rescue. Disclaimer, this is an experimental technology, and it works currently only on Mac OS nightly builds. So to enable this, go to About Config and turn on the record replay flag to true. And once you turn on this true, you'll see this nice button sitting in there. And once you enable this, so this is the web replay button. And once you enable this, you will actually see a web recorder kind of looking thing. So I have enabled Web Replay, and I try to add something onto my to-do list. So just notice how the red bar is moving with dots and how the output is getting logged. And I try to add in more things, and the dots just go over. So these dots are what represent time, and you can click on this and exactly go back over time or go forward with time. So you can add conditions, add condition breakpoints, add log points, see what output this particular value had this particular point of time, click on a particular dot, go back on time, and just try to see the experience. So Web Replay also works with the DOM and the CSS, so you will also be able to change some styles on the inspector and still be able to go back and forth with this. So when you're at a particular point of time, you can actually get what this particular item's value was. So when you go back over time, get a particular item, just log on the value and see what the value is, and just go on to the next item to see what will the value of the next be. So this gets really cool when you want to really understand what sort of experience that your colleague had, and how you can just get that debugging stuff, especially when you're working remotely, or I think it gets better over time. And what is cool to see here is when you enable Web Replay, the new button that gets added to the debugger, that is this one, which lets you go back over time or lets you rewind execution. And there is another button similar to step over. This is like reverse step over, so you can exactly reverse step back one thing at a time. So as I already said, works on my machine. This, once this is there, I think this is going to solve all the problems, because Web Replay also has this feature of saving a recording and loading a recording in new tab. And this exactly gives you a feel of what the other person would have debugged and what sort of errors were encountered at what point of time, and how you could improve, play around with new set of values, etc. All in all, thank you. So all in all, the DevTools landscape is in a very interesting phase. So if at all you want to get involved, there is the great debugger community. You're invited to join the Slack channel. We have 462 members and still counting. So there is also this repository on GitHub with these numbers, but now due to the one new version of Firefox, the current version what is there on GitHub is a bit down. So all of the development has switched to Mozilla Central, which is, again, just one-time setup, nothing scary, and after all, it's just a React and Redux app, so we should be able to debug. So head on to docs.firefoxdev.tools to get the source code and all the instructions. And speaking earlier, I mentioned about this Outreachy program, so Anjana also mentioned earlier today. It is this Outreachy opportunity which gave me a great experience to get involved with the open source community. And the good news is the next round of applications for December to March 2020 have just opened this week. So please check out outreachy.org if you identify yourself as a person from an underrepresented group. It's a paid 3-month remote internship opportunity. And so thank you, React Rally, for having me here. Thank you, the debugger team, staff, and volunteers, especially David Walsh and Jason Laster, for answering my last-minute questions and reviewing my slides. And thank you, everyone, for being here and listening. Thank you so much.